Madeline stared blankly at the whitewashed wall, the doctor's words floating around her like phantoms. First Thomas, now this, her husband of 3 years gone in a mining accident. And with him, her dreams of the family they'd planned to start that very year. "There must be something you can do," she whispered, though she already knew the answer. "Medicine has its limitations, Mrs. Daniels. I truly am sorry." 2 weeks later, Madeline stood in the cemetery, placing wildflowers on Thomas's fresh grave. The wind whipped at her black mourning dress as she made her decision. She couldn't stay in Helena where memories haunted every corner. The small inheritance Thomas left would be enough to start somewhere new, perhaps further west where no one knew her story. By early autumn, Madeline found herself stepping off the stagecoach in Silver Creek, a growing settlement in western Montana Territory. The town wasn't much a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church spire rising above the rest, and scattered homesteads spreading into the surrounding grasslands and foothills. "Rooms upstairs, last door on the right," said Mrs. Inside, she found an elderly man sorting through a stack of books. "Excuse me," Madeline said, removing her gloves. "I'm inquiring about whether the town needs a teacher." The man looked up, surprise evident in his pale blue eyes. "Why, that's providential timing, Mrs. Daniels. Madeline Daniels." "Mrs. Daniels, I'm Reverend Whitman. I've been filling in since our last teacher left 2 months ago. But at my age, keeping up with 20 children is becoming quite the challenge." He eyed her carefully. "Do you have teaching experience?" "I taught for 2 years in Helena before my marriage." An hour later, Madeline walked out of the schoolhouse with a position as Silver Creek's new teacher, starting the following Monday. The pay was modest, but it would cover her room and board with enough left to slowly build savings. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt a glimmer of purpose. That Sunday, Madeline attended service at the white steepled church, taking a seat near the back. She noticed the townspeople eyeing her with curiosity. A new face was still an event in Silver Creek. Several women nodded politely, and Madeline returned their acknowledgement with a slight smile. After the service, Reverend Whitman introduced her to several families whose children would be in her class. Madeline was speaking with Mrs. Miller about her twins when she became aware of someone watching her. She turned to find a tall man leaning against the church's outer wall, his gaze steady. He straightened when their eyes met, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair. His face was sun-weathered, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. His clothes were plain but well kept, a simple cotton shirt, denim pants, and worn boots. Not a townsman, Madeline guessed, but a rancher. "Mrs. Daniels, have you met Bradley Vaughn?" Reverend Whitman asked, following her gaze. "He runs the Rocking V Ranch about 5 miles out of town." The rancher approached, extending a calloused hand. "Madam, heard you're taking over the school." "Yes, starting tomorrow," Madeline replied, surprised by the slight tremor in her voice as she briefly shook his hand. "Good. Town needs a proper teacher." His directness was startling after the careful politeness of the others she'd met. "Do you have children in the school, Mr. Vaughn?" she asked, immediately regretting the question when something unreadable flashed in his eyes. "No, madam. No children of my own." He nodded to her and the Reverend. "Good day." Madeline watched him stride away, his shoulders square beneath his worn jacket. "Don't mind Brad," Reverend Whitman said softly. "He's a good man. Lost his wife in childbirth 5 years back. Both her and the baby. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's always first to help when the town needs it." Madeline felt a pang of empathy for the rancher. They were both acquainted with loss, it seemed. The schoolhouse was a single room with rows of wooden desks, a pot-bellied stove in the corner, and a large slate board at the front. Madeline arrived early on Monday, arranging books and writing her name carefully on the board. Mrs. Daniels. By 8 o'clock, 18 children ranging from 6 to 15 filled the desks. Madeline took a deep breath and began the day with introductions. The children were curious but respectful, and by noon, she felt she'd made a promising start. As the children ate their lunches outside in the autumn sunshine, Madeline heard a commotion. Looking through the window, she saw the Miller twins arguing with a small, ragged boy she didn't recognize. "That's not yours," one of the twins shouted, shoving the smaller boy. Madeline hurried outside. "What's happening here?" "He stole my biscuit, missus." After a long pause, he nodded. "Guess I could stay. For today." Jack sat in the back row for the afternoon lessons. Though he didn't participate, his eyes never left the slate board as Madeline taught basic arithmetic to the younger children. When school ended, the other children hurried off, but Jack lingered in the doorway. "Will you come back tomorrow, Jack?" Madeline asked. He shrugged again. "Maybe. I hope you will. I'll have extra lunch for you." She watched him dart away down the street, disappearing behind the livery stable. That night, Madeline had trouble sleeping, her mind filled with thoughts of the homeless boy with defiant eyes. Jack did return the next day and the next. By Friday, he had moved to a middle row desk and even raised his hand to answer a question about addition. Madeline made sure to bring extra food each day, which he accepted with less wariness as the week progressed. Friday afternoon, as Madeline was wiping down the slate board, she heard the unmistakable sound of boots on the schoolhouse steps. She turned to find Bradley Vaughn filling the doorway, hat in hand. "Town's talking about him. And you. What are they saying? Some think you should mind your own business. Others think you're doing the Lord's work." He paused. "What do you think you're doing?" Madeline met his gaze steadily. "The only thing I can. Helping a child who has no one else." Bradley studied her for a long moment. "Do you know where he goes at night?" "No. He won't tell me. Winter's coming. Won't be safe for a boy alone." Madeline's concern must have shown on her face because Bradley's expression softened. "I'll keep an eye out for him," he offered. Madeline gasped when she saw his face. A large purple bruise bloomed across his left cheek and eye. "What happened to you?" she asked, moving toward him. Jack backed away. "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're clearly not fine. Who hurt you?" "Don't matter. I ain't coming back to school. They don't want me there." "Who doesn't want you there?" "The other kids' parents. Heard Mrs. Miller tell Mrs. Peterson I'm dirty and probably got lice." His chin jutted out defiantly, though his lower lip trembled. "Said I shouldn't be sitting next to her precious twins." Madeline felt a surge of anger. "Mrs. Miller doesn't decide who attends my school. I do. And I want you there, Jack." "Why?" The simple question held a universe of doubt and suspicion. "Because every child deserves an education. And because I believe you're smart and capable." Madeline took a step closer. "Now, please tell me who hit you." Jack looked away. "Some bigger boys. From town. Said I was stealing jobs from their pa by helping at the livery." "Have you eaten today?" A slight shake of his head. "Come with me. We'll get you cleaned up and fed." "Where?" Madeline hesitated. "Daniels." He nodded, then looked at Jack. "You're the boy who's been sleeping in my barn." Jack took a half step behind Madeline, saying nothing. "Mr. Vaughn," Madeline began. "Jack needs help. He can't stay in that abandoned cabin, especially with winter coming." "What happened to his face?" "Some older boys beat him up." Bradley's jaw tightened. He dismounted, crouching to Jack's level. "Those boys have names?" Jack shrugged. "The butcher's son. And another." Bradley nodded, standing again. "Mrs. Daniels, what were you planning to do with him?" "I don't know," she admitted. I can't keep him at the boarding house. Bradley seemed to consider something, then made a decision. Jack, you know how to ride? The boy shook his head. Time you learned. You'll ride with me back to the ranch. We've got plenty of room, and my cook, Hector, always makes too much food. Jack looked up at Madeline, uncertain. Mr. Vaughn has a good ranch, she assured him. You'd be safe there. And Mrs. Daniels can visit to continue your schooling, Bradley added, surprising both Jack and Madeline. If that's agreeable to her. Of course, she said quickly. I could come after school hours. Jack looked between them, then gave a small nod. Bradley lifted him onto the saddle of his own horse, then mounted behind him. I'll bring him to school tomorrow, Bradley told Madeline, and we'll sort out the rest. As they rode away, Madeline felt a curious mixture of relief and something else she couldn't quite name, something that had to do with the way Bradley Vaughn had so naturally stepped in to help, and the unexpected gentleness in his hands as he'd lifted Jack onto the horse. True to his word, Bradley brought Jack to school the next morning. The boy was nearly unrecognizable clean, with trimmed hair, wearing clothes that, while obviously hand-me-downs, were whole and fit him reasonably well. The bruise on his face was still vivid, but he held his head high as he walked into the classroom. Mrs. Daniels, Bradley said, standing in the doorway. Jack has something to ask you. Jack shuffled his feet, then looked up. Mr. Vaughn says I should be properly enrolled in school, with a last name and all. He glanced back at Bradley, who nodded encouragingly. He says I could use his last name for school purposes. Jack attended school daily, his confidence growing as he proved to be a quick learner. Bradley would bring him in the morning and collect him after classes. Twice a week, Madeline rode out to the Rocking V Ranch to provide additional tutoring, as Jack needed to catch up to children his age. The ranch was impressive, not the largest in the territory, but well-maintained, with a handsome two-story main house, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, several barns and corrals, and grazing land stretching to the distant mountains. Though he never explicitly claimed a father's role, his actions spoke of a deepening attachment to the boy, checking his schoolwork, teaching him to whittle, ensuring he ate properly and went to bed at a reasonable hour. One crisp November afternoon, as Madeline concluded Jack's reading lesson in the ranch house's comfortable sitting room, she found herself watching Bradley through the window as he demonstrated how to repair a bridle to Jack. The man's patience and the boy's rapt attention created a tableau that made her heart ache with a complicated longing. He's a good man, said Hector, who had entered silently with coffee. Never seen him like this before. Not since Maria died. Madeline accepted the coffee with a smile. Jack is fortunate to have found him. Perhaps they found each other, no? Hector gave her a knowing look. And perhaps they both found you, Senora. Before Madeline could respond, Bradley and Jack entered, bringing with them the crisp scent of autumn air. Finished the bridle? Hector asked. Jack's a natural leatherworker, Bradley said, his hand resting briefly on the boy's shoulder. Better than some of my hands. Bradley was quiet for a moment, watching Jack through the open door of the workshop. I know what it's like to lose everything. His voice was low. When Maria died, along with our baby, I thought there was no purpose left. Threw myself into the ranch, worked from dawn till I collapsed. He met Madeline's gaze. Jack needed someone. Turns out, maybe I needed someone too. The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep in Madeline. Without thinking, she placed her hand on his arm. I understand. After I lost Thomas, I felt hollow. And then learning I could never. She stopped, realizing she'd never spoken of her barrenness to anyone in Silver Creek. Never what? Bradley asked softly. Never have children of my own, she finished, barely audible. The doctor said the damage was irreversible. Understanding dawned in Bradley's eyes, followed by a compassion untainted by pity. "I'm sorry, Madeline." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared pain, but also of possibility. The moment was broken by Jack's excited call from the stable. Bradley cleared his throat. The storm had intensified beyond anything she'd anticipated, the wind howling around the schoolhouse and snow piling against the doors. When she tried to leave, she found herself knee-deep in drifts, the air so thick with snow she couldn't see the buildings across the street. Fighting panic, she retreated into the schoolhouse, added wood to the stove, and tried to stay calm. The building was solid, and she had fuel for the night. By morning, surely someone would check on her. As darkness fell, the temperature plummeted. Outside, Bradley lifted her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, his arms creating a secure circle as he took the reins. "Hold tight to the saddle horn," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear. "Trust me and trust Samson. He'll get us home." The journey was a nightmare of cold and fear. Madeline lost all sense of direction as the horse plowed steadily through drifts, Bradley occasionally dismounting to lead them around obstacles she couldn't see in the darkness. His body shielded her from the worst of the wind, but still, the cold seeped into her bones until she felt she'd never be warm again. Just when Madeline thought she couldn't endure another minute, lights appeared ahead, the welcoming glow of the rocking V Ranch house. As they approached, the front door flew open, and Jack stood there in his nightshirt, Hector behind him with a lantern. "You found her," Jack called, his face alight with relief. Inside, Madeline was bustled into the sitting room where a roaring fire and hot coffee awaited. Her fingers and face burned painfully as circulation returned, and she realized how close she'd come to serious frostbite. "You'll stay here until the storm passes," Bradley said, returning from settling his horse. It wasn't a request. Hector brought blankets and more coffee, while Jack hovered anxiously until Bradley gently sent him back to bed with assurances that Mrs. Daniels was safe now. "You risked your life," Madeline said softly when they were alone. "You could have frozen to death looking for me." Bradley sat beside her, his own hands still red from cold. "I couldn't not look," he said simply. The storm raged for 3 days, dropping over 2 feet of snow and effectively isolating the ranch. Madeline found herself unexpectedly comfortable in the Vaughn household. Hector provided delicious meals. Jack was thrilled to have her there, and Bradley. Bradley revealed himself to be a thoughtful host and an engaging conversationalist when given the opportunity. In the evenings, after Jack went to bed, they sat before the fire talking. As they sat there, the boy gradually nodding off between them, Madeline caught Bradley's gaze over Jack's head. The look they shared was laden with unspoken possibilities. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and bright, the storm finally spent. The snow glittered under a brilliant blue sky as Bradley and Jack cleared paths between the house and outbuildings. Inside, Madeline helped Hector prepare the feast: a turkey, sweet potatoes, fresh bread, and pies. 2 of the ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse joined them for the meal, and the atmosphere was festive and warm. As Bradley carved the turkey, he raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his voice unusually solemn, "to unexpected blessings. A year ago I sat at this table alone but for Hector and the men. Today," his eyes moved from Jack to Madeline, "today I'm reminded that life can surprise you with second chances." "To second chances," Madeline echoed, raising her own glass. After dinner, while the others dozed by the fire, Bradley invited Madeline to walk outside. He took her gloved hands in his. "I know it's soon. We've known each other only a few months, but I feel we understand each other in ways that might take others years." He looked down at their joined hands. "I'm not asking for any promises today. Just, would you consider staying? Not just until the snow clears, but longer. Stay here at the ranch. There's a small cabin on the property, about a quarter-mile from the main house. It was the original homestead. You could have your privacy there, continue teaching in town. The week after Thanksgiving, Madeline moved into the cabin on the Rocking V Ranch. It was indeed small but solidly built, with 2 rooms, a main living space with a kitchen area and stone fireplace, and a bedroom just large enough for a bed, chest, and small table. Bradley and his men had cleaned it thoroughly, stocked it with firewood and basic provisions, and even added small touches like curtains at the windows and a bookshelf filled with volumes from the main house's library. "It's perfect," she told Bradley as he carried in the last of her meager belongings from the wagon. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversations, with Jack's presence providing a natural buffer that kept their developing relationship progressing at a measured pace. On weekends, Madeline helped Jack with his studies while Bradley worked with the ranch hands. Sometimes, when chores allowed, they all rode out together to check on distant pastures or simply to enjoy the spectacular Montana landscape. During these outings, Madeline observed the easy rapport between Bradley and Jack, how the man instinctively provided the guidance and structure the boy needed without crushing his spirit. Madeline was saved from answering by Bradley's entrance. He took in the scene with a questioning look. Jack was asking about family, Madeline explained, hoping her flushed cheeks weren't too noticeable. "Big subject," Bradley said, sitting down at the table with them. "Anything specific?" Jack looked between them, then evidently decided on directness. "Why doesn't Mrs. Daniels live in the main house with us? If we're a family?" Bradley's eyes met Madeline's over Jack's head. "That's a fair question," he said carefully. "Mrs. Daniels and I are friends, good friends." Bradley stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Madeline," he said, her name a caress. "May I kiss you?" Her answer was to rise on tiptoes, meeting him halfway. His lips were warm despite the cold night, and his arms around her felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, almost reverent, then deepened with a hunger that left them both breathless. When they finally parted, Bradley rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since Thanksgiving," he murmured. "I've wanted you to," she confessed, her hands resting on his chest. Jack was beside himself with excitement, running from window to check for Santa, even though Bradley had explained that Santa wouldn't come until he was asleep. The ranch hands joined them for a festive dinner, bringing homemade gifts and good cheer. As the evening wore on, Hector produced a fiddle and began to play, filling the house with music. 2 of the younger hands danced a lively jig, making Jack collapse in giggles. When Hector switched to a waltz, Bradley turned to Madeline with an outstretched hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Daniels?" His eyes held a distant memory, but without the sharp pain she'd glimpsed months before. She strung popcorn garlands and hung them everywhere, said if we were going to be in a tent, it would be the prettiest tent in Montana territory. Madeline smiled at the image. "She sounds wonderful." She was. Bradley's gaze returned fully to the present, to Madeline. "And she would approve of you, I think, of how you've brought light back into this house." The music ended, but they remained standing close together until Jack tugged at Bradley's sleeve. "Is it time for bed yet?" he asked, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Santa won't come until I'm asleep." Bradley laughed. "Indeed it is, partner. Why don't you say good night to everyone?" After Jack had made his rounds, Madeline accompanied them upstairs to help with bedtime. As she tucked the blankets around him, Jack grabbed her hand. "Mrs. Daniels, will you be here when I wake up? For Christmas morning?" Madeline glanced at Bradley, who stood in the doorway watching them. "Would you like me to be?" Jack nodded vigorously. "More than anything." "Then I will," she promised. I'll come over very early, before you wake up. Or you could just stay, Jack suggested, his eyes already drooping despite his excitement. In the guest room. Again, Madeline looked to Bradley, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. All right, she agreed. Just this once. Because it's Christmas Eve. Jack's smile was her reward. Best Christmas ever, he mumbled as he drifted towards sleep. After he was asleep, Bradley showed Madeline to the guest room, a comfortable space down the hall from his own bedroom. You're sure this is proper? Madeline asked, suddenly conscious of what the arrangement might suggest. It's Christmas, Bradley said simply, and you'll have a 7-year-old waking you at dawn. I think propriety can bend a little for those circumstances. He hesitated at the door. But if you're uncomfortable. No, Madeline said quickly. It's fine. I'd like to be here when Jack wakes up. Bradley's smile was tender as he wished her good night. Christmas morning was everything Jack had hoped for. He burst into Madeline's room at first light, dragging her downstairs where Bradley was already stoking the fire. Under the small pine tree in the corner were presents, practical gifts like new boots and a coat for Jack, but also toys and books that brought wonder to the boys' eyes. Madeline had gifts for them both, hand-knitted scarves she'd worked on secretly in her cabin during the evenings. Bradley gave her a beautifully bound journal, its leather cover tooled with wildflowers, and a fountain pen. For your thoughts, he said as she ran her fingers over the fine workmanship. Or for stories. You mentioned once that you used to write them as a girl. She was touched that he remembered such a small detail from their conversations. The day passed in a haze of happiness, a special breakfast, visits from the ranch hands to exchange small gifts, an impromptu snowball fight in the yard, and a dinner that left them all pleasantly stuffed and drowsy. As dusk fell, Jack fell asleep on the settee, worn out from excitement. Bradley carried him up to bed, and when he returned, he found Madeline standing by the window, looking out at the snow-covered land. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly, coming to stand beside her. He opened the box to reveal a ring, a delicate gold band set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "This was my grandmother's," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Maria never had the chance to wear it. I'd be honored if you would." Madeline stared at the ring, her heart pounding. "Bradley, are you sure? It's been such a short time." "I've never been more certain of anything," he said firmly. "I love you, Madeline. I want to build a life with you, to raise Jack together, and perhaps—" He hesitated. "Is that a yes?" Bradley asked, a smile beginning to curve his lips. "Yes," Madeline managed. "Yes to everything. To being your wife, to being Jack's mother, to filling this home with children who need one." Bradley slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, sealing their commitment with a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in the Silver Creek Church. The town turned out in force, curious about the swift courtship but generally supportive of the match. Jack stood proudly beside Bradley, serving as best man despite being half the height of the other men in the wedding party. During the ceremony, when Reverend Whitman asked who gave this woman to be married, Jack stepped forward and declared, "I do," causing ripples of laughter and tears among the congregation. Later, he told everyone who would listen that he was getting a mother and father on the same day, which he considered extremely efficient. Spring brought new life to the rocking V. "Sorry to disturb you, but there's a matter that needs attention." "Is it Bradley?" Madeline asked, rising quickly. "Has something happened?" "No, madam. Your husband's fine as far as I know." He shifted uncomfortably. "It's about some children. 3 of them siblings. Their parents died of fever 2 days ago over in Clearwater. No relations coming forward to claim them." "That's terrible," Madeline said, her heart going out to the unknown children. But why come to me? Word gets around, Mrs. Vaughn. Folks know how you took to young Jack there, and how you and Mr. Vaughn have made a proper family for him. Thought you might have some advice on what to do with these little ones until the territorial authorities can place them. Madeline glanced at Jack, who had appeared in the doorway, listening intently. How old are these children, Sheriff? Girls about 12, boys maybe 9, and the little one's just a baby, not more than a year old. Jack stepped forward. We have room, he said with certainty. Pa's building more bedrooms already. The sheriff looked between them, hope evident in his weathered face. It'd just be temporary, you understand, until proper arrangements can be made. Madeline thought of Bradley's words on Christmas night. Jack is only the beginning. They'd talked of taking in more children, but had planned to wait until the house expansion was complete. How soon would they need a place to stay? She asked. They're at the doctor's house now, but he's not equipped for children, especially the baby. He's hoping someone could take them by tomorrow. Madeline made her decision. Bring them here. We'll make room until other arrangements can be found. After the sheriff left, Jack turned to her with shining eyes. Are we getting more kids? For now, Madeline cautioned. We don't know what will happen long-term, Jack. And we need to discuss this with your father when he returns. He'll say yes, Jack said confidently. He always says family is what you make, not what you're born with. The next day, Sheriff Davis arrived with the 3 children. Emma, the serious 12-year-old with her mother's Bible clutched to her chest. Daniel, the quiet 9-year-old who kept his eyes on the floor, and baby Rose, round-cheeked and solemn in Emma's protective arms. Their name's Collins, the sheriff explained. Father was a shopkeeper in Clearwater until the fever took him and his wife. Madeline welcomed them warmly, showing them the rooms they would use, assuring Emma she could keep baby Rose with her if that made her more comfortable. Jack immediately appointed himself as Daniel's guide, showing him the ranch with proprietary pride. By the time Bradley returned 2 days later, the Collins children had begun to settle in. He found Madeline in the kitchen, baby Rose on her hip as she stirred a pot of stew, Emma setting the table while Jack and Daniel brought in firewood. He stood in the doorway, taking in the scene with amazement. I leave for 5 days and come home to a full house? Madeline turned, relief and uncertainty in her expression. Bradley. I can explain, but he was already crossing the room, one arm going around her waist while the other hand gently touched Rose's cheek. No explanation needed, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Looks like we've started on that big family sooner than expected. It's just temporary, Madeline hastened to say. Until the territorial authorities. Bradley silenced her with a kiss, mindful of the baby between them. Let's not be too hasty about involving authorities, he murmured when they parted. These children need a home. We have one to offer. Later that night, after all 4 children were asleep, Bradley and Madeline sat before the fire, discussing the future. You're really willing to take on 3 more children? Madeline asked. It's a lot of responsibility. Bradley took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. Remember what I said to you on Christmas night? That there are many children who need parents. He smiled, the firelight playing across his features. I meant it, Madeline. This land has room for many more, and so do our hearts. Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow but of overwhelming joy. When I learned I couldn't have children, I thought that dream was over, she whispered. I never imagined that we'd build our family this way. Bradley finished. Sometimes life's greatest blessings come from its deepest sorrows. He squeezed her hand. What do you think? Shall we offer the Collins children a permanent home? Madeline's answer was in her radiant smile. By the summer of 1879, the expansion of the main house was complete, with ample room for the growing Vaughn family. The territorial court had granted Bradley and Madeline guardianship of the Collins children, with adoption proceedings underway. Jack, now officially Jack Vaughn, had eagerly embraced his role as big brother to Daniel and little father figure to Emma and Rose. Word spread throughout the territory about the ranch that welcomed orphan children, and by Christmas of that year, 2 more had joined the family, a 10-year-old boy named Samuel whose father had died in a mining accident, and 6-year-old twins, Lucy and Liam, whose mother couldn't care for them after their father abandoned the family. Bradley hired a young widow from Silver Creek to help Madeline with the children and the household, allowing her to continue teaching part-time at the school. They converted the old cabin where Madeline had first lived into a schoolroom for days when weather prevented travel to town. On Christmas Eve of 1880, as they sat surrounded by their 7 children before the fire, Bradley presented Madeline with a gift, a hand-carved sign to hang at the entrance to the ranch. "Rocking V Home Ranch," it read, "where families are born from the heart. Do you like it?" he asked as she traced the letters, her eyes shining. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Jack, now 10 and growing tall, leaned against Bradley's shoulder. "Remember when you told me that real families aren't just about blood?" he asked Madeline. "I remember. You were right." He looked around at his siblings, none related by blood, all bound by love. "This is the realest family I know." As Madeline met Bradley's gaze over their children's heads, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From the despair of widowhood and the sorrow of barrenness to this abundance of love and life. "I never could have imagined this," she said later, as they stood on the porch watching the star-filled sky after the children were asleep. Bradley's arm tightened around her waist. "When you first told me you couldn't have children of your own, I remember thinking that maybe that wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a different one. A better one than I ever dreamed possible," Madeline said, resting her head against his shoulder. "And we're still writing it," Bradley reminded her. "There are more children out there who need homes. As long as we have room in our hearts and under our roof, our family can keep growing." As they stood together under the vast Montana sky, Madeline thought of how a single act of kindness, Bradley taking in a homeless boy, had set in motion a cascade of love that now embraced 7 children and would likely welcome more in the years to come. The woman who couldn't have children of her own had become mother to many, and the cowboy who'd lost his family had founded a new kind of dynasty, one built not on blood, but on the far stronger foundation of chosen love. "Merry Christmas, my love," Bradley whispered, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Merry Christmas," Madeline replied, her heart full to overflowing. "And here's to many, many more." Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were home, truly, finally home. And outside, the first soft flakes of a Christmas snow began to fall, blanketing the rocking V Home Ranch in a silent blessing, promising new beginnings with each pristine layer.